in the academia we say that good conclusion is not closing a debate about its promise of leading the debate on a different level, more complex and richer. So I won't conclude in the common meaning of the notion, but just share with you some of my very personal observations on what has been going on in this 1.5 day in our conference. We have heard lots of very informative papers, some of them analytical and scholarly, and I think that most of us took something from everything we have heard. But personally, as I promised I would share with you my own feelings, I was struck by to my mind, most important statement that was made yesterday morning at the very beginning of our discussions, and that statement was actually confirmed in a splendid way by the video we just watched a few minutes ago. Dr. Alcalde yesterday morning in his intervention emphasized that equality, including equality of suffrage, it's not a mere legal arrangement. We follow guidelines and we get it. It's always a problem, an intellectual, a political, and a social problem. The social dimension was exposed by the video we just watched. So the law may be perfect. We all know that the most beautifully written constitutions are sometimes in African countries because their drafters were graduates for La Sorbonne or from Harvard or Oxford, so they wrote very nice, very compelling texts. But what is actually going on in that respective African country doesn't at all or very little fit the Constitution. So equality is always a problem. And equality of suffrage, it seems to me, is somehow seized on the one hand by law, what I said, the international guidelines, advices, you do that 10%, not more than 50%, and so on and so forth. And you obey the guidelines, or you try to argue with those guidelines and state that your own local national tradition commands you to proceed otherwise. And on the other hand, equality of suffrage is seized by the state, and most specifically by the nation state. There were, and several times, again and again, discussions when the issue of proportional representation was addressed, that usually, in most cases, if not in all, the constituencies take the shape of the administrative unit of the nation state. So the nation, via state authority, dictates where and how people should vote. Someone wondered yesterday about the American Senate, how the way it is elected, and that is also true for the Swiss Upper House, doesn't fit any guidelines that affirms equality of suffrage, because equal suffrage is a principle and a practice that is grafted on sometimes very old nation states. The US, when it was founded on the Aristotelian principle of a mixed government. The president embodied the principle of monarchy, the Senate aristocracy. That's why the Senate wasn't even elected until 1913, when the 17th Amendment to the Constitution invited the citizens to freely elect their senators. The senators were appointed by the state congresses, the state assemblies, and then the democratic principle embodied by the House of Representatives. So this is the US. When universal suffrage was introduced, and very late, despite different mythology, who state that the US is a very old democracy, it's a quite recent democracy. It's a proper democracy after 1964, the Civil Rights Act, which introduced really universal suffrage. But it grafted it in a republic, in a free republic, it is true, that was designed not on democratic principle and not to meet the requirements of equality, race equality, gender equality. In the late 18th century, someone like Jefferson strongly believed that men were created equal, and he wrote it in the Declaration of Independence. But for him, men were white males. So we always have to take into account this kind of weight of the nation state whenever the nation state was built before the principle of equal suffrage was even phrased and introduced in most northwestern countries, that is after the Great War of 1914-1918. So what I be thinking of when remembering our conversations for this 1.5 days, I would simply recall the fact that we should face the issue of equality as a problem that needs every day a new solution. We shouldn't be happy, content that we have some legislation, that we follow the guidelines, because it would not do in practice. Most of the people, even if they cast their ballot, would have the feeling that their ballot means nothing compared to the ballot cast by different other people belonging to a different gender, a different social class, and so on and so forth. So, quality of suffrage, the vote, and the voting process itself, we should always keep in mind, despite the whole legal literature that envelops, shelters it, and makes it somehow a hygienic product. It's always something very real. And it's a political matter. And it should be addressed politically by each nation state. Not even, you know very well, not even in the European Union, despite electing the Common Assembly, the European Parliament, we were not able to stop. I mean politicians, scholars, lawyers, whoever has a stake in the process, we haven't been able to eliminate what is usually called the democratic deficit. On the contrary, the democratic deficit is looming larger every day into the European Union. Because, as the French political philosopher Pierre Manon famously argued, The only body we know of democracy is the nation. We cannot have democracy outside a nation. We can experience it. We may try to come up with a solution. That's why the 28, tomorrow 27 member states of European Union are trying to do. They failed so far to create a European democracy. We are still in the presence of an Estonian democracy, a Romanian democracy, a German democracy, a French democracy, an Italian democracy, which are very different because the nations are different, they belong to different histories, they have had political experiences that are far from being identical. So the only body of democracy, the only body of equality, where equality at least we may think that it could be possible to accomplish it or to get some measure of it, some fair measure of it, is the nation. And as I said, nations are different. And to my knowledge, I very much hope that someone will contradict me and add other examples, but to my knowledge, only 2 nations today identify themselves with democracy. That is one of the items that they use for telling who they are to the world at large is democracy. And one case we have discussed, Dr. Kumar told us moments ago important things about India. The other country, very different, is Switzerland. 2 countries that claim to be democracies and to be held together as nations by democratic principles, among which equal suffrage. So nations still continue to decline their identity on different dimensions. Not democracy, not even equality of suffrage. So these are the few thoughts I would keep in my mind at the closing of our conference. But it would be unfair to wrap up this discussion without thanking my colleagues at the Permanent Electoral Authority of Romania, especially Ingrid Picu, Luisa Nedelcu, and Elchiza Marcu, and the whole crew that made possible our discussions and helped us have, hopefully, I wish you a good time in Sinaia, and this afternoon the time we have could be even better than it was thus far. Less intellectual, obviously, but pleasant. I thank them very, very much. And my last word is very technical. After lunch, we go to lunch now. After lunch, at precisely 2 o'clock in the afternoon, a bus would be stationed near the hotel to take us to a tour to visit the Pelez Castle and then to have dinner in a nice restaurant at the outskirts of Sinai. It's 2 o'clock. It's 2:30, we'll arrive at Pelez. We'll be departing at 12. If I'm not mistaken, I got it right, I think, no?
Again, thank you. At 2 o'clock, a bus would be stationed in front of the hotel to take us to Pelez, and afterwards we go directly to the restaurant. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and enjoy the rest of the day. Yes.